Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So we are now entrenched in his middle period, in Beethoven's middle period. And it was important for me at this show to go right off the bat and to start talking about his deafness and when his deafness began to affect his life. I wanted to read a brief passage from Jan Swafford. You know, I talked about this fit of anger that he had at this singer who was knocking at his door, and he went down on his face to the floor, and he lost his hearing. That obviously wasn't the cause of his hearing loss, and we still don't exactly know what the cause of his hearing loss is. But here's a passage from Jan Swafford. That fit of rage would have been the trigger, not the cause of his deafness. By that point, he may have had lead poisoning, maybe gotten the lead salts commonly added as a sweetener to cheap wine, or from lead wine containers, or from the waters of spas. Lead or something equally insidious was ravaging his gut. But lead does not usually attack the ears. That had another cause. Beethoven was doomed to go deaf by something that occurred before, maybe typhus, or one of the other illnesses of his past years, or childhood smallpox. In any case, something that had passed but left behind a terrible legacy. So Beethoven, it's not really talked about much because the deafness overtakes sort of his whole discussion about his health during his life. But he suffered from grave stomach ailments throughout his life and could be bedridden for days, having all sorts of problems with his intestinal tract and everything. And what Swafford is talking about is that, this lead poisoning in these different aspects of his life. And it's interesting in reading up about Beethoven that he was quite a drinker, Beethoven. What we could probably look back on as borderline alcoholic, but it's hard for us to, come back and look at these things. But Beethoven liked his drink and would get drunk quite often at what Jan Swafford is referring to as a cheap wine. Like, he wasn't very fancy about it. But the Heiligenstadt Testament, have we heard about the Heiligenstadt Testament of Beethoven's?
Nope.
I mean, this is one of the most remarkable documents in, not only music history, but in any artist's history. This is a document of an artist's innermost struggles and pains and how he seeks to overcome them. And I thought it would be, this is the one show where we're really, this is where it comes to the fore and we're focusing on it. And I wanted to read you the first two paragraphs, which are quite long, of the Heiligenstadt Testament. He wrote this in the form of sort of a will, but it was also a document for posterity. He never mailed the letter. He kept it in his desk. He kept it with him his entire life. And Swafford talks about him using it as a talisman for strength as he was suffering through his illness. But I just bear with me. I would like you to just hear this is the first two paragraphs. And I eliminated, toward the end of the document, it goes into what he's giving to his brothers, upon his death and things, more like a will. But here we go. October 6th, 1802. For my brothers Carl and Johann Beethoven. Oh, you men who think or say that I am malevolent, stubborn, or misanthropic, how greatly do you wrong me. You do not know the secret cause which makes me seem that way to you. From childhood on, my heart and soul have been full of tender feeling of goodwill, and I is ever inclined to accomplish great things. But think that for 6 years now I have been hopelessly afflicted, made worse by senseless physicians, from year to year, deceived with hopes of improvement, finally compelled to face the prospect of a lasting malady, whose cure will take years or perhaps be impossible. Though born with a fiery active temperament, even susceptible to the diversions of society, I was soon compelled to withdraw myself, to live life alone. If at times I tried to forget all this, oh, how harshly I was flung back by the doubly sad experience of my bad hearing. Yet it was impossible for me to say to people, speak louder, shout, for I am deaf. Ah, how could I possibly admit an infirmity in one sense, which ought to be more perfect in me than others? A sense which I once possessed in the highest perfection, a perfection such as few in my profession enjoy or have ever enjoyed. Oh, I cannot do it. Therefore, forgive me when you see me draw back when I would have gladly mingled with you. My misfortune is doubly painful to me because I am bound to be misunderstood. For me, there can be no relaxation with my fellow men, no refined conversations, no mutual exchange of ideas. I must live almost alone, like one who's been banished, and I can mix with society only as much as true necessity demands. If I approach near to people, a hot terror seizes upon me, and I fear being exposed to the danger that my condition might be noticed. Thus it has been during the last 6 months which I have spent in the country, in Heiligenstadt. By ordering me to spare my hearing as much as possible, my intelligent doctor almost fell in with my own present frame of mind, though sometimes I ran counter to it by yielding to my desire for companionship. But what a humiliation for me when someone standing next to me heard a flute in the distance and I heard nothing. Or someone standing next to me heard or someone heard a shepherd singing, and again I heard nothing. Such incidents drove me almost to despair. A little more of that and I would have ended my life. It was only my art that held me back. Ah, it seemed to me impossible to leave the world until I had brought forth all that I felt was within me. So I endured this wretched existence, truly wretched for so susceptible a body, which can be thrown by a sudden change from the best condition to the very worst. Patience, they say, is what I must now choose for my guide, and I have done so. I hope my determination will remain firm to endure until it pleases the inexorable Parsi to break the thread. Perhaps I shall get better, perhaps not. I am ready. Forced to become a philosopher already in my 28th year, oh, it is not easy, and for the artist much more difficult than for anyone else. Divine One, thou seest me in my inmost soul, thou knowest that therein dwells the love of mankind and the desire to do good. O fellow men, when at some point you read this, consider then that you have done me an injustice. Someone who has had misfortune, man, console himself to find a similar case to his, who despite all the limitations of nature, nevertheless did everything within his powers to become accepted among worthy artists and men. You, my brothers Carl and Johann, as soon as I am dead, if Dr. Schmidt is still alive, ask him in my name to describe my malady and attach this written documentation to his account of my illness, so that so far as it is possible, at least the world may become reconciled to me after my death. So here's Beethoven, who obviously, you know, the tragedy of a musician of any sort, losing their hearing like that, but socially separating himself from the outside world, not feeling comfortable even in the most, you know, the smallest of social instances. And he pours his soul out into this document, saying that it's only his art that is keeping him from taking his own life, and his need to express himself to the world. It's an incredible document. It's a really incredible document. The original manuscript of this letter still exists. It's at the University of Hamburg, actually. And when I was in Hamburg 2 years ago, I actually stopped by to see it. And strangely, it was given to the university by the soprano Jenny Lind, who I guess had purchased it at some point, which I thought was kind of random. So from now on, Beethoven's hearing will continue to deteriorate until let's say 15 years from now, where he goes completely deaf. It's very, very tragic. But here he is, like before he has this struggle, he goes to Heiligenstadt, he composes these pieces, and the Opus 31 number 1 was in a moment of optimism it was composed during the summer of 1802, and he was loving being in the countryside, and just it's a very, very lovely work. What did you think of Manny's performance of Opus 31 number 1? Anyone good? Great. Not so great.
Incredible. Enjoyed it.
Outstanding.
So this movement, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this movement, but it's a very interesting movement. It's the second longest slow movement in all of his piano sonatas.
Mm.
Can anyone tell me what the longest movement is from which sonata? It's funny. It's a slow movement that gets overlooked because of the sheer enormity of the movement that follows it. Actually, the fourth movement. It's the Hammerklavier Sonata. That is the longest movement. This movement comes in at 10 minutes, 10 minutes long, and it's actually Beethoven mocking something. He's got all this staid thing and these trills everywhere, and it's a very stately tune, and he's sort of mocking the stuffy salon music of the time, as well as what he was referring to, the preening of the Italian opera, this very, very, very Baroque presence with singers and the presentation of opera and in salons, and he was mocking it with this tune. But then, you know, he only mocks it so long, and then he gets into a little bit more deep music, and then he goes back to all the trills and mocking it again. It's quite a parody, this piece. So, but I wanted to, does anybody have any thoughts on Opus 31, number 1?
Could I just make a comment that just...
Oops, sorry, David.
You're muted.
Sorry, David. There you go.
In terms of, I had I used to live in California, and I had a very good friend who was a very distinguished otolaryngologist named Victor Goodhill. He was also a fine musician, a violinist. And he wrote a pretty major work where he was tracing the progression of Beethoven's deafness, plotting against the music that he was writing in different times. And it was a pretty successful demonstration that you could show a reflection of the decline in the hearing with some of the musical developments. I thought that you might find that interesting.
That is very interesting. The man's name is Goodhill?
Goodhill, Goodhill. He was a distinguished surgeon and otolaryngologist. He had a procedure named for him, but he was also a very committed musician. I also heard something that I don't know if you have heard, but quite recently, there was some suggestion that while clearly there was serious decline in hearing of Beethoven, but he never reached the point, as we had always thought, that he was stone deaf, that even at the end, he still had some hearing. Had you heard that?
I've not heard of recent research about that, but I will look into it. I mean, there's the famous stories of him conducting toward the end of his life, where he was quite different than the orchestra. It was quite a disaster. But no, I'm not aware of that, David. I'll try to track down some information on that as we go later into his career. I'll ask my cronies, especially Jonathan Biss. He would probably give me some very good information on that.
David, is there some succinct way of saying how the deafness affected the composition? Clearly, I understand it did, but did it make it more chromatic or?
I think he basically was showing that the harmonies became more and more complex as he was less tied to being able to hear the harmonies. That he was more, it was more abstract in that way. I read it many years ago, and I once tried to find it and I couldn't find that study, but I think that was basically what he was saying, Gary.
I see. I was just thinking, it seemed like he was just evolving as a
Sure.
composer,
Sure. I mean, the late quartets compared to the Opus 18s and what we heard today in the middle. I mean, it's evolving in complexity and profundity and all. So the deafness was only a kind of an ancillary explanation of something. Was trying to find an angle, but I don't think Victor Goodhill would have questioned what you're saying about the evolution in Beethoven's depth and profundity.
Yeah, I think, you know, one could argue that not having the ability to hear it freed him, that he was not chained to tropes of the time, even with functional harmony, that he would seek new voice leading in his harmonies and not be so, you know, he was always experimenting with harmony. And this piece especially, I didn't want to get to, you know, I've been talking a lot about harmony, and I'm going to be talking a lot about harmony moving forward in this show. But if you have a chance, if you guys haven't gone on Coursera for Jonathan Biss's Beethoven lectures, they're fantastic. And he did multiple shows on this very piece. And he says that it's a major pivot point harmonically in Beethoven's music, because we often, you know, we talk about the relationship of tonic and dominant throughout the course of history in classical music, 5-1, 5-1, 5-1. And this is the piece where he starts to have relationships with the mediant, or the third degree. So the tonic is the first degree, the dominant is the fifth degree, and then the middle one, the mediant, is the third degree. So he's developing tonal relationships between mediants in this work for the first time, and continues to do that throughout his career. And and provides, you know, the chromatic notion, chromatic movement, which we're going to look at in the Waldstein and Razumovsky, and is a precursor to Wagner, absolutely a precursor to Wagner. So it's very fascinating. I really encourage you to do those lectures. He goes throughout, you know, the course of Beethoven's life, and they're very, I love how he balances. It's very accessible. You don't have to be a musician, but it's if you are a musician, it's very interesting. He has a way of balancing and marrying, you know, the amateur classical music listener with an amateur musician, let's say. They're wonderful. They're absolutely wonderful. Mm-hmm. So we move now to the Waldstein Sonata, which is, you know, a lot of people's favorite sonata. Did we like Manny's performance of Waldstein?
Yeah.
That's a yes. Yes, we like Manny's performance of Waldstein. But for me, you know, in doing the Waldstein, for me, it's all about the transition from the second to the third movement. It's just the most magical. When that third movement happens, it's just, boo, it's just so beautiful. So I wanted to take a look at the score and do a little listening. Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to read first a passage, very brief passage from Maynard Solomon from his Beethoven book about this sonata and the Appassionata. And Solomon says, with the Waldstein and Appassionata sonatas, Beethoven moved irrevocably beyond the boundaries of the classical keyboard style to create sonorities and textures never previously achieved. He no longer reined in the technical difficulties of his sonatas to permit performance by competent amateurs, but instead stretched the potentialities of both instrument and performers to their outer limits. The dynamics are greatly extended. Colors are fantastic and luxuriant, approaching a quasi-orchestral sonority. For this reason, the critic Wilhelm von Lentz called the Waldstein, quote, a heroic symphony for piano. And there's no coincidence in that the Waldstein Sonata is in C major, and C major is a major key for, an important key in Beethoven's life. So let's take a look at the score. And basically, I have the tail end going into the third movement. So ba 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 be ba. So he's transitioning through keys. He's starting in F major, E major, then he goes E minor, diminished 7, E major. But here we go again. Here we go again, just like last week. Look at the notes. We've got D, D flat, C, B, A flat, G, A flat pedal, G, 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 A flat, and then B to the leading tone of C. So he's going down again. He's doing this chromatic motion, just like we saw last week in the bass line. And he's doing these minor chords with diminished 7, dominant 7, diminished 7, dominant 7 chords, diminished 7. He's moving all over the place with keys in order to get him to the C major opening of the Appassionata. It's marvelous, and when he's doing this, he's giving this, I described it as a searching sort of feeling, and this is what it is. It's sort of, it's a little foggy and mysterious in how he's moving towards C major. So let's just hear that section right there from this bar right here. Here we go. E major. C sharp minor 7, E major. Diminished 7. B dominant 7. So here he is. He just goes and stretches. And then you see, just like in last week, he speeds up the ba-dee-da, ba-da-dee-da, ba-da-dee-da, ba to create the tension. And then he slows the meter down before the cadence, slows it all down. And then finally at the last second, he gives you the tonality, that G dominant 7, that expects to go boom, bum, ba, dee, da, da, da. It's just wonderful.
I have a question. I was so busy watching the notes, I wasn't watching the tempo markings or the acceleration or deceleration. Was that marked by Beethoven?
No,
No. Ah.
no. I'm just double checking just to make sure. So no, that's not at all. Not at all. That's all, Manny. But that's, it's moving. I mean, I think it's appropriate. It's appropriate. It's wonderful. It's one of the great moments in music, right there. And then you have, then he does that, he plays this tune so marvelously. It's all very much C major, and then he in the B section goes C minor. And then that coda where he quadruples the speed. Dee dee da 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 da, dee da 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 da. It's just, yeah, really, really, really wonderful, wonderful. I mean, we're all familiar with the Waldstein, yeah? Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggies. That's one of the biggies in in music, in his repertoire, especially in classical music history. And it is often paired with the Appassionata, which happens 2 years later. And we'll be focusing on the Appassionata next week. And they're two very distinct and different emotionalities with these two pieces. It's very, very interesting.
Derek, I'd have to think about it a little bit more. Maybe you or somebody else, knows offhand. Just this. It reminds me of the Fifth Symphony as far as like the transition into something, either heroic or just, emotionally fulfilling. But like right before you're kind of in this nebulous place where you're not really sure where he's going to go. I'm just kind of curious about like, other compositions now where he did that. Is it perhaps mostly in this key of C works, or is it kind of, is it maybe more of the middle period? I'd have to think about it a little bit more. I mean, I've heard most of his compositions, but again, maybe somebody knows offhand, like how frequently this happened.
Well, I mean, this is, he's getting this. It's a mean towards an end in the Waldstein. He's getting there. He's taking you there. It's just very, very foggy. He's still guiding you there. But interesting that you say that in the Razumovsky that we're just about to look at, it's completely different, where there's just nothing going on in relation to what the tune is about to come in. I mean, that's the whole, and we'll look at that right now. So it's, it's a different where this is really, he's giving you hints, and then he's building the tension, slowing down, and then tonally, there's an arrival point in Waldstein, where in the Razumovsky that we're about to look at right now, there's really not.
Right.
Yeah.
What I get out of those two movements is the second movement. It's someone questioning, it's contemplative, and saying, gee, what should I do now? And he's thinking and developing a thought, and then suddenly, this is it. This is the way to go.
Exactly. And he really, when he gets you there, when it's in C major, he doesn't mess around when he gets to C major. He's in C major a whole lot of that last movement. So, except in the B section, he goes into minor. But he's not moving chromatically like elsewhere. He's really firmly based in C major. Any other thoughts about Waldstein? 59, number 3, the last of the Razumovskys. I'd said, these were weird pieces. The first two especially for listeners, and symphonic in nature. These are massive quartets. I don't know if David, have you read the Razumovskys? Yes.
That first movement has a famous passage, which is a shoal for cellists. It's the fingers and so. Yeah, I've played it many times. It's a towering work.
The Razumovskys, just like the Brahms quartets, they sound like an orchestra. It's a very, very thick, full texture in these quartets. The quartets have to put out a lot of sound in these works. But I want to focus on what I just alluded to, the opening of the first movement of the Razumovsky, and it harkens back to the Mozart Dissonant Quartet, K465. Do we know that piece? Yes. No, maybe. Yes. I wanted to play a little excerpt of the Mozart, and there's a reason why it's called Dissonance. So here's a performance of YouTube of the Castalian Quartet from Wigmore Hall, and unfortunately, the Castalian was on the program this month actually, and yeah, but we're working on another date. So here is the Castalian Quartet from Wigmore Hall. We're just going to hear the opening of the Mozart Dissonant Quartet.
Okay.
So imagine in Mozart's day, you come to a concert, oh, hey, Mozart's got a new piece. Let's go listen to it. And that thing happens.
Not what you expect.
What? Not what you expect, right?
No.
No. I mean, it's really it's a stunning work. And this was Beethoven's inspiration for this opening of Opus 59, number 3. But you can see in Mozart where he sort of settles in at the end of that introduction, doesn't he? And then he gets you right off into the exposition of the first movement. Beethoven, not so much. So let's take a look at the Beethoven. So I'm not going to go heavy into the harmony, but this is, if for all you musicians out there, this is a key of C major or A minor, but it's a C major, and he starts off with an F sharp diminished 7th chord right off the bat, just nowhere near the key center. And look again, I circle the chromatic notes. Look what he's doing again and again. F sharp, F, E, D, C, B, A flat. A flat continues, then G, F, E, E flat, D, and then down to C. All the way down. And in the middle of this, he's just passing through keys from F sharp diminished 7 to an F major dominant 7. A major, you know, there's relationship here with A and D here, but G and D, yes, but then B diminished 7, then a B flat diminished 7. I mean, it's harmonically, you know, for harmonic function, I don't want to get too into it. It's really wild, really wild. And then you have these suspensions here where there's tension in the notes here. Where is it? There are major seconds, B and D. Anyway, so he gets into this thing, and then he just you know, he doesn't do what Mozart does here. He's got a B diminished seventh chord, sustained. There's no transition. There's no transition. And then C major, bam. You see, all the connector is just this note to that note. That's it. The B to the C. There's no preparation for it. It's stunning, absolutely stunning. Let's listen to it. Just this opening. Here we go. The diminished seven, very tense. Dominant seven. A minor. Dominant no relationship. I hate to break it off right there. But he just has this opening that's just like, what is going on here? Like it's just tense chords, and then there's some major tonality in there, but not much. But it has absolutely nothing to do with C major, the key of the exposition. It's stunning, really stunning. It's like,
I recall the last chord before getting to the C was a B diminished 7.
yes,
So the notes are B, D, F,
A flat. It should
G
be.
sharp. Well, G sharp. It's almost like a G7 chord, except you have a jazz musician would say a flat 9.
Flat 9. Yeah.
Right.
But it's, you know, why did he have that introduction? Why?
Suppose we handed something like that to our music teachers today, and they would say, why did you start like that? Why don't you transition? Transition was a big word. And I wonder what they would say today if we did that.
Well, we talked about that in previous shows. The reason why geniuses are geniuses is because they break rules.
Right.
I mean, that's the answer. I mean, you know, he just, you know, on its face, why was this introduction necessary? It has nothing to do with the piece. It's, you know, it's amazing. Like he just said, oh, he's like, okay, I'm gonna, he, you know, the Swafford thinks that the first two Razumovskys are sort of trickier to listen to. They're not as tuneful as this one is. So he made this one in the third of the set. He makes it the exposition very tuneful, but he's not going to let you get away with it. He wants to give you something right up front that's going to befuddle you.
Dissonance, yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Any other thoughts about this quartet? I wanted to play a little bit of the piece I had mentioned earlier, which is, to me, you know, it's arguable. We will be playing in 2 weeks the G major opus 96 violin sonata, which is considered by many to be his greatest sonata. But I have a very special place in my heart for the Kreutzer Sonata. Do we know the Kreutzer Sonata, opus 47 violin sonata? We'll be listening to it. The most charming movement is the theme and variation movement, which we'll listen to on Zoom for my improvisation show in 2 weeks. But I wanted to play the first movement of the Kreutzer Sonata. Interestingly, that this sonata was written for a black violinist named George Hightower. Does anybody know?
Yeah, the name's familiar.
So he wrote this for this young black violinist who premiered it at a salon. And apparently there was a falling out between the two of them. And Hightower said in later years that it was over a girl. and he dedicated it, Beethoven ended up dedicating it to Rodolphe Kreutzer, who was a French violinist. And Swafford thinks that he was trying to seek favor with the Parisian culture so he could sell music. And Kreutzer never actually played, there's no evidence that he ever played the piece. And here he is, he's got his name attached to this piece, in addition to a Tolstoy novel and a quartet by Janacek. So I wanted to play the first movement. It's about 10 minutes long of the Kreutzer Sonata. And this is a performance with Gideon Kramer and Martha Argerich. So, oh, hold on. Let me get to the page here. Okay. Here we go. The first movement of Beethoven's Kreutzer Sonata.
Wait. Both of them are so.
Outstanding.
Of course they have. That's well known.
Something, huh? What'd you think of that?
Outstanding.
Not a bad performance by some unknown musicians.
Yeah, really.
Wow.
Incredible music making. I just wish they didn't look like, particularly Gideon Kremer, that he's in agony all the time. One time she cracked a smile, but he's
Oh, they
always
are.
like he's suffering.
I often say, like, I don't care if they dress up in a clown outfit and stand on their head. If they play like that, I don't really care.
They are in agony in a way.
No, it's really, you know, it's such a monumental work.
Mhm.
It's just, you know, traverses all of this universe. And the second movement is just so delightful, and we'll hear it in a couple weeks. But Kramer and Argerich recorded the whole set of Beethoven sonatas for Deutsche Grammophon, and this was back in the 80s. And it's a great set. It's a great set. Kramer is, you know, Kramer sometimes doesn't sound so pretty. He does things, you know, he's not a beautiful fiddle player sometimes, but he is a great musician. He's a really, really wonderful musician.
Technique and all.
And to hear Argerich play these piano parts, it's such a treat.
She
Really
was
treat.
right on cue.
I really recommend checking out those recordings. They're wonderful, wonderful. Any other thoughts for tonight? A lot of music tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was
Thank
terrific.
you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
next week we'll look at the Appassionata and some other works during the middle period, and we'll see you next week.
Derek,
Thank you, Derek.
Yes.
what's the name of that lecture?
Okay, sorry, yes. So the website is Coursera. So course, COURSERA.org. If you just Google Jonathan Biss Beethoven lectures, and it's all free. You just sign up and you take the whole class, and it's really marvelous. So it's Coursera.org, and he did it at the Curtis Institute. And it's basically Jonathan lecturing and playing. Yeah, it's really wonderful. Really, really wonderful. All right, everybody.
Right.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Stay well.
Stay calm.
Good night.
Everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take care, everyone.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.